So 2 videos ago, I talked about FOMO, right? Or fear of missing out, and its effect on people's buying habits, and this idea that you don't need absolutely everything. And despite all that, I am here to talk to you about some upcoming releases. So the lens that I'm kind of want to look through here is not to tell you everything that's coming out, say in the Blue Note Classic series or in the Tone Poet series. And in fact, I've done some videos, at least on Tone Poet and some of these other releases, some of these other series in the past. What I want to talk about is those particular titles, after weeding through everything that's coming out over the next several months. What am I most interested in? What have I already pre-ordered? And you know, it's not to say that you should do the same. I always encourage people to go and preview. I just think that sometimes for some folks who are relatively new to this hobby, it's convenient to have someone who is, I don't know, trying to sift through that potentially on your behalf in order to direct you to releases that maybe you otherwise weren't aware of. So what I'm going to do in this video is talk through, I think, about 7 releases plus 4 box sets. And to be candid, I have not pre-ordered those box sets, but I think the 7 releases I have. And I think most of those are reissues. There is one that represents brand new music. I will include some links in the description in case you want to go and check those out, preview them, etc. Also, just one quick thing before we get into that. I don't know if anybody missed the announcement, but yesterday, which was like the 19th of July, Blue Note announced that Chet Baker Sings, and Nigeria by Grant Green, both Tone Poets, are back in print. These records have been going for a lot of money on the secondary market because of flippers, mostly. And now you can buy them direct again from Blue Note for the regular retail price. So anybody who had been waiting and really frustrated by not having those in print, guess what? They're finally in print again. You can go over to Blue Note and pick them up if you want to. All right, so the first one I want to talk to you about is a little bit controversial. Those of you who have been following my channel over at least the last couple of months know that I have a bone to pick with Third Man Records, specifically their Verve by Request series. Now, this title that I want to talk to you about is actually not a part of the Verve by Request series, but instead is being called the Third Man 313 series. What this is in partnership with Blue Note, where Blue Note has allowed Third Man to press I guess 5 titles in this Blue Note series. Now I know what you're going to ask is why would Blue Note allow that? I have no idea. Don't know the rationale, but in any event, they are allowing Third Man to put out some of these titles. I believe the reason why it's called the 313 series is because that's the area code for Detroit. So initially, there's 2 titles that are coming out both tomorrow. Today's July 20th. Tomorrow's July 21st. They're coming out tomorrow. And so those 2 are Electric Bird by Donald Byrd, and then the other is called Detroit / New York Junction, and that's by Thad Jones. So in this case, and while the Verve by Request series has not been very upfront about the pressing process, the 313 series references that the original tapes were sent to Third Man's mastering and pressing facility for an all-analog remastering process with engineering by Warren DeFever, lacquers cut in the studio on a Newman VMS 70 cutting lathe. I don't know what that means exactly, but what it sounds like is that these are all analog. All right, so I am going to give you a little bit of background on these titles and talk to you about which of the ones that I actually pre-ordered, because one of them I didn't. But first, a few other pressing details. So these are both going to be 180 gram, and there's actually a few different varieties that you can get, as Third Man typically does. So there's the Blue Swirl, so Blue Swirl vinyl, that Blue Note has from their site, which costs $39.98. There's also a standard black edition for $35.98, and then there's a solid blue of Electric Bird and a solid white of Detroit, New York Junction for $37.98, and that's if you order from Third Man Direct. I think you need like a Vault membership for that, but you can also get them on youdiscovermusic.com, and you don't need any such membership, to my knowledge. So the question, I guess, first before we get into those albums and the merits of them is what am I getting in which version? Well, I'm only getting one title initially, dipping my toe in because I am highly skeptical of Third Man at the moment. So I'm starting with Electric Bird. That's what I'm getting, and I did get the Swirl, and I don't know exactly why, because generally speaking, I'm not a color vinyl person. But I figured, I don't know, this is a limited series. I might as well just spend the extra $2 and get something that's a little bit more interesting. All right, so let's talk briefly about these two titles. Here's the thing. Detroit New York Junction has had just 2 reissues ever on vinyl in the United States. One was in 1975 for your probably United Artists, and the other was in 2006 for Classic Records. I would say both are relatively scarce, and simply because there's been so few reissues. And certainly that Classic Records, almost anything that Classic Records put out on 200-gram vinyl ends up being, north of $100, $200. This is a title that's never been tackled by Music Matters or in any other modern Blue Note series outside of that Classic Records series. I do have an original, and it's right here. And this looks very nice, I'm sure, on video, but just know that the vinyl is in G+ condition. So you might say, well, then why wouldn't you want to get the Third Man reissue? And here's the thing, and I don't know if this makes sense, so you can tell me if it does. I don't think that handing off a 1500 series mono Blue Note to an engineer who hasn't done 1500 series mono Blue Note before really instills much confidence. And believe me, I know that the engineer, DeFever, I think that's how you pronounce his name, for Third Man is very accomplished. I know that he's done a lot of their titles, but I'm not going to pre-order it. I'm going to wait and see what everybody else thinks. I don't think that this is going to be a series that is going to sort of sell out quickly. So I don't think there's any just any rush on this. Could be my opinion, but that's what I'm going with. On the other hand, Electric Bird, right? So this is what I have an original. This is what Donald Byrd's Electric Bird looks like. My copy's fine. I mean, it's got some ring wear, but whatever. The vinyl is great. So this title hasn't had a reissue since 1996, and that was done by Capitol. I also think that this is in need of a modern reissue, just to keep it in print and make sure that people who want it these days can get a copy. And I absolutely love this album. So I have this original. I don't know if there's more that's hidden in the master tapes that can sort of be extracted with a modern reissue. But I'm willing to take the chance, and like many other chances that I take, if I don't like it, I'm sure that I can just resell it. All right, so why am I so gung-ho on Electric Bird? Well, okay, so just a couple of things. So this is a title that was released by Liberty, so Blue Note's, Liberty, in 1970, in what I'm going to call the 8300 series. Some people don't like to acknowledge everything that comes after catalog number 8300 as its own series, but I do. There's plenty of great stuff. There's just 4 tracks on this album, and 3 of them are over 10 minutes long. For me, in this era, that's a great sign. I would call this music atmospheric, introspective, kind of fits that post-bop vibe a little bit, but even moves into not fusion, but certainly like I'll say electric fusion that Miles Davis was experimenting with. So the lineup on this title, again, this is what it looks like, includes Pepper Adams, Ron Carter, Mickey Roker, Duke Pearson. Pronunciation is Hermeto Pascoal, perhaps. Wally Richardson, Frank Foster, Lou Tabak, and Bill Campbell, and of course, Donald Byrd. This one was recorded by Rudy Van Gelder, so big shoes to fill in terms of the reissue on this. Like I said, it does have influence from Miles Davis's Electric Period, but it's not overly funky as much as it is spacey. If I could distill the effect maybe simply, I'd say it feels like you're floating through space while high. This was one of the very first Blue Note titles I ever got into, and so I feel like I just have more skin in the game on the reissue, and that is indeed why I decided to pick it up. All right, so I told you I had a bone to pick with Verve by Request, and that is why I'm not going to be highlighting their releases in any level of detail. I'm not personally pre-ordering any of them, but I did just want to reference really quickly because they also are coming out tomorrow, the 21st. And while we're on the topic of Third Man, so the 2 titles are Psychosimodus by Yusef Lateef and Black Unity by Pharaoh Sanders. I do have originals of both of these titles, and I'm frankly not interested in what Third Man is doing with them. And I'm certainly not interested in their yellow color varieties. All right, so now we're actually going to jump ahead to September. It's not to say that I'm not getting anything in August, but I've highlighted it in a previous video. It's Sunday at the Village Vanguard, Bill Evans' OJC series. You just heard what I thought about their Waltz for Debbie take. I am still somewhat optimistic, or at least interested in what they do with Sunday at the Village Vanguard, so we'll see how that goes. But in any event, shifting into September, and actually September 8th, this is a brand new title. Matthew Halsall's An Ever-Changing View, and that is on his own Gondwana Records label. So the reason why I'm excited about this one is because back in 2020, my favorite album of the year in terms of new music was his most recent studio album, and that was called Salute to the Sun. It is phenomenal. You should go check that out. Preview it on Bandcamp. So Halsall is a trumpet player, but doesn't feature himself as prominently, I suppose, as much as he highlights that group dynamic. The music to me has kind of an earthiness to it, very much in that UK spiritual jazz kind of thing, but I'd say more organic and I'll say original than perhaps what some of the other artists are doing in that space. So the title is available currently on Bandcamp for 25 British pounds. Which probably is the best bet for those who are located either in the UK or in the EU. However, for those of us in the US, guess what? You can get it for $32.99 on Amazon. Interestingly, I got different prices. If I got onto Amazon on my phone, it said $32.99, but if I went on the desktop computer, it said $34.99. I don't know why that is. But anyway, you know, check it out maybe on mobile and laptop to figure out what's what. So this one should be delivered actually on the 11th of September. So it has the release on the 8th, should be delivered by Amazon domestically in the US on the 11th. I'll include a link in the description in case you're interested in picking that one up, but certainly go to Bandcamp and preview it. If you've never heard of Matthew Halsall's music, highly recommend it. I've been trying to pick up, I would say, most of his albums just because I think he's doing really, really exciting work. Okay, so now, there's a big release day in September, and that is September 15th. Mark your calendars. So there's actually 4 titles that have already pre-ordered that are coming out on that day. And I'm okay with that because I've only pre-ordered that one title in August. I don't really have much in transit at the moment. So, okay, there's 4 titles that are coming out at one time, but you know, whatever. It's not like I'm buying a lot of stuff around it. So first one I want to address is Pharaoh by Pharaoh Sanders. And I suppose I'm going to call this a box set, even though it's just a double LP. So the label behind it is Luaka Bop. It's pronounced Luaka, right? I don't know. So this is a label that I believe was started by David Byrne. They previously put out the Pharaoh Sanders Floating Points collaboration and actually own that, plus the titles that they've put out by Jim White. Jim White is a non-jazz artist, but I'm a big fan, and he's sort of a local Georgia musician. I personally thought that the Pharaoh Sanders Floating Points release was a fiasco, but the music did sound great once I got a playable copy, which, by the way, I pre-ordered it. It took them 6 months to ship it after the release, and then it was warped and they had to send me a replacement, which took another 3 months. Like I said, it was a fiasco, but I also think that this is probably one of the highest volume titles they've probably ever put out in terms of sales. So I did think, though, that they did a great job in the Jim White titles, so we'll see. This Pharaoh Sanders set is being called an embossed box set. It includes 2 previously unreleased live performances of the track Harvest Time. It includes a 24-page booklet with interviews, essays, and photographs, and what they're calling is a separate collection of ephemera. No idea what that consists of, and I assume, because it's not specific, that they mean that it's going to be like digital ephemera, perhaps? Alrighty, so this is what the title looks like. So you can see mine's a little bit worse for wear, at least in terms of the cover. Vinyl's fine. It's got the radio station call tag. This is one of those rare titles. You can, I think you can find it in it's either a blue tone cover or a brown tone cover. I have the brown. I can't remember if one of them is supposed to be earlier than the other. They're probably the same year, but maybe one was earlier. So with this box set, with this reissue, the primary material, I would say, is still the studio album, which was put out, that version was put out on India Navigation in 1976. So it includes in the lineup some musicians. So let's see, it's Pharaoh Sanders on harmonium, Clifton Chase on organ, Tsiji Munoz on guitar, Steve Neal on bass, and then Greg Bandy and Lawrence Killian on percussion. These, for me, are not exactly the most well-known musicians, but I've owned an original of this at least for a few years now, and I absolutely love it. And I love the opportunity to have a better sounding copy because the music just feels so incredibly rich. It's a title that gives me goosebumps, especially with that track Harvest Time. As soon as I put it on, it's just so beautiful. So with this new edition, the studio album has been newly remastered. However, Luaka hasn't provided any details about the process. So I don't know whether it's sourced from the original master tapes just yet. They have not put out any information, and that's not exactly encouraging. I know that Luaka is not necessarily in the vintage jazz reissue game, and so maybe they aren't used to sort of the expectations of the audiophile community in terms of being upfront with some of the process. Here's the thing, hopefully it just sounds good, right? Almost independent of the process. I just want it to sound good. So with this title, and again, box set, it's available for pre-order for $54.98, and again, it is out on September 15th. As a point of comparison, this album was selling for close to $1,000 during the pandemic. So if you want a decent, affordable copy, this could be your chance, even acknowledging that $54.98 is a lot of money when you consider that probably most people who might be interested in this box set are interested in it for the studio album. All right, number 2 on September 15th is another huge one in my opinion. This is Blackstone Legacy by Woody Shaw. This is being put out by the Kraft Records subsidiary Jazz Dispensary, which typically does a fantastic job as well because they have very much the same process as Kraft Records does. So this is also a double LP because that's how the original was released. The original album was a double LP. This was recorded in 1970 and released originally in 1971 by Contemporary Records. The lineup includes, I think this is pretty exciting, Gary Bartz, Lenny White, Clint Houston, Ron Carter, Benny Maupin, and George Cables. This is a title that I've never owned a copy of in any form. But I previewed it over the years and it sounds phenomenal. I've been looking for a copy for a long time. I've just never been able to afford one. So the details on this reissue are that it is 180 grams. It's pressed at RTI with a gatefold tip-on jacket. It was remastered from the original analog tapes by Kevin Gray, and it cost $39.98. So Luaka, that's how you do it. You state those pressing details so people know what they're gonna get. All right, so I told you it was gonna be a big day. And it's a little bit unusual for me to pick up 4 titles on one release day, but here we are. So also on September 15th is one that was supposed to be released over a year ago in the Impulse Acoustic Sounds series, but for some reason it kept getting delayed. I have no idea why. So hopefully now this is a firm release date, but the title is Roy Haynes' Out of the Afternoon. So similar to other titles in the series, it's 180 gram, pressed at QRP, stout and tip-on jacket, mastered by Ryan K. Smith from the original master tapes. Also, hopefully to some of the other titles in the series, it's going to sound phenomenal. So about the music here, this is Roy Haynes as a leader, alongside Tommy Flanagan on piano, Roland Kirk on a variety of instruments, as usual, and Henry Grimes on bass. It was recorded by Rudy Van Gelder in 1962. The highlight here for me is the track, here's the thing, the whole album is great, but I think the highlight probably for me is the track Raoul, which seems to be, for me, a really interesting mix of kind of like hard bop with more complex chord progressions, and certainly Roland Kirk brings an elevated sense of like harmony to it. So it still very much is a forward-looking album, but I would say even despite the fact that it was in 1962, it's not as far out as, say, what Eric Dolphy was doing, but it's still I would say adventurous all around, even if it kind of mixes these sort of two things of like some more traditional hard bop, but also some very much sort of forward-looking, kind of exciting, more free type of music. All right, so the last one on September 15th, and then I'm going to mention a few additional box sets after that are sort of slated for later in the year. And I'm sure that we'll talk about those as we get a little bit closer. But again, on September 15th is Tatsuya Nakamura's Focus. This is the latest edition in the BBE, which stands for Barely Breaking Even, J-Jazz or Japanese Jazz series. So the BBE J-Jazz series. I am not a completist with most modern series. And in fact, I'm not with any modern series except for this one. Doesn't mean that you're going to like it, but I love it. What this is a single LP release. It was originally put out on the Seahorse label in 1984, which if you haven't heard of that label, don't worry, this is the only title they put out. So who is Nakamura? Well, he is a percussionist. He's played really a variety of styles from fusion to avant-garde, even rock. He stayed mostly in Japan as far as I can tell, but he actually did play on a pretty interesting Ted Daniel record with Oliver Lake and some other folks. Originally recorded in 1975, it ended up getting finally released in 2014. It's pretty out there, actually. In the middle of his career, though, Nakamura was a drummer for the Japanese rock band called Blanky Jet City. I wasn't really familiar with them, but I guess they were active for a long time. So what else? Nakamura played with Pharaoh Sanders and John Hicks, among others. Anyway, Locus is his, Focus is his third album as a leader. So this one was brand new to me. I hadn't heard of it before, but one of the reasons why I like BBE is they kind of bring things forward that otherwise I wasn't aware of. So I thought I'd talk a little bit more about what this release is, and then you can go to Bandcamp, and if you want to preview a track, you can. So the lineup here includes, well, Nakamura on drums, obviously. You have Hideto Kanai on bass. You have Kazumasa Akiyama on electric guitar, Jun Fukamachi on keyboards, Tatsuji Yokoyama, and Yuji Sakai on percussion, and then Shinobu Fujimoto on trumpet. The original of this album is not terribly expensive, actually. But it is quite rare nevertheless, with I think only 19 people on Discogs actually having recorded it as an album, indicated that they have that in their possession. This new release cost 28 British pounds, but the problem is it's an additional $26 in shipping to the United States, plus tax, which comes to about 69 US dollars. But, and that's for a single disc. But what you can do is wait for it to be available domestically as well, and then you save on the shipping, probably significantly. Usually Acoustic Sounds, I'm sure that there's other retailers, but I know that Acoustic Sounds typically gets the BBE J-Jazz series after it's been released. So you won't necessarily be able to pre-order it on Acoustic Sounds, but you can wait for them to have it in stock, generally speaking. So go check that one out on Bandcamp for a preview. And actually the specific track that they have posted is titled simply Ballad, and it's super interesting, very spacey, a little new agey, I would say, but it is from the early 80s, and they're very much getting into that. I would say that the feel is very sort of introspective playing, especially with Shinobu Fujimoto's trumpet. Has a bit of a Marion Brown feel to it, I think. But anyway, exciting nevertheless. And like I said, I'm personally completist with this series. Anybody who's interested in J-Jazz, I think, should at least go and see what's out there, see if any of the titles speak to you. All right, so what I'm going to do now, I've covered all those individual releases, and I want to leave you with a couple of box sets just to put on your radar. I am not the advocate for people to spend hundreds of dollars on box sets that they're not going to listen to. But again, I wanted to make sure that these were on your radar. Full transparency, I've not pre-ordered these yet. But they're each ones that I'm at least considering. And like I said, I'll address more of these, I think, probably in subsequent videos, especially if I do end up getting one of these box sets, because I know people like to hear about what you're going to get before you fork over the money. So if I'm able to pick up a box set, then I'll certainly cover them in a video. So the first one I want to talk about is by VMP, or Vinyl Me Please. They're putting out a couple of box sets very, very soon. In fact, 3, I think. Well, one's not technically a box set, but we'll get into that. So the first is the Miles Davis Anthology, and it's titled specifically The Electric Years. So what VMP is doing is they're creating box sets around specific either themes or labels or artists, They're putting it all together and releasing it, and it's a situation where you can't buy the individual releases. And I know a lot of people want to, but that's just not how they're doing it. So this particular box set, again, Miles Davis, The Electric Ears, it includes In a Silent Way, Bitches Brew, A Tribute to Jack Johnson, Live Evil, On the Corner, Big Fun, and Get Up With It. So I am not all in, I would say, on Miles Davis's Electric Period. However, out of those releases, In a Silent Way is one of my favorite titles he ever put out, and I absolutely love both On the Corner and Get Up With It. And I can't exactly figure out why I'm so drawn to those, because I know they're pretty out there. In total, this box set is 11 LPs, all on 180 gram vinyl. They are pressed at GZ and not at Vinyl Me Please's new pressing plant that just came online this month. And my guess is because they've already pressed all the vinyl. All of these are all analog masterings, and according to them, are from, quote, one-to-one tape transfers of the master tapes. And that was done by Ryan K. Smith at Sterling Sound. Now, this anthology, similar to their other anthologies, is pretty expensive. It's $349 for members and $399 for members. So yes, that is $57 per album for non-members. I get it, it's pricey, it's expected to ship in November, and who knows if some other outfit is going to put these out with essentially the same masterings. I don't know what the plans are. Obviously, you can get some of these titles, or at least In a Silent Way, on MoFi, if that's the direction that anybody wants to go. But anyway, I'm just putting it out there for saying, hey, it's available, and it's something that I'm certainly interested in, and I haven't figured out if I'm going to take the plunge yet. All right, this next one is also VMP. It's also an anthology series, and this one is a little bit controversial from some of the chatter that I've been hearing online. So this one is called The Story of Impulse. So Impulse Records. So the reason why there's some controversy around this one, well, first, I don't know that it's necessarily fair, some of the shade that it's being given. And I'll explain. So first, what albums do we have here? It's John Coltrane's Africa Brass, Chico Hamilton's The New Amazing Chico Hamilton Quintet, Lores Alexandria's Alexandria the Great, Charles Mingus's Mingus Plays Piano, Gabor Jabo's Jazz Raga, Mel Brown's Chicken Fat, Pharaoh Sanders' Karma, and Alice Coltrane's Ta the El Dowd. All right, so as far as mastering details, the first 6, so sequentially the ones that I walked through, the first 6 of those titles are all analog. The remaining 2, Karma and Ta the El Dowd, are a hybrid, and this is their words, of the highest quality digital and physical masters available, with lacquers cut by Ryan K. Smith and Barry Grint. So these are all 180 gram, pressed by Vinyl Media Pressing. And yes, that is Vinyl Me Please's brand new pressing plant that they seem to be quite proud of. I have not personally heard any title that this plant has put out yet. It just came online. I'm excited to find out whether they do a better job than GZ. So this anthology is at the same price point, $349 for members, $399 for non-members, and it's supposed to come out sometime in the winter of 2023. So back to the controversy. Well, the Mel Brown title, Chicken Fat, and the Alice Coltrane title, Ta the El Dowd, were recently put out by Verve by request. That label series keeps coming up here. And Acoustic Sounds just did Karma. So you could argue that Coltrane, Sanders, and probably the John Coltrane, the Pharaoh Sanders, and the Alice Coltrane titles are probably the most desirable here. And 2 of them were just redone. Well, guess what? Apparently this box set was originally supposed to come out before those releases. But the box set was delayed. So here's the thing. I don't think Verve by Request did a very good job with their titles. So it still could be worthwhile for some of you Impulse aficionados who weren't satisfied with the Verve by Request to actually pick this up. But considering that I have most of the titles in this box set in their original form, I am going to pass. All right, 2 more to put on your radar. This isn't as much a box set, but it is a bundle. So VMP again, is also putting out 4 additional impulse titles separately that can be purchased individually as well as together. You get a savings if you purchase them together. So we have Archie Shepp's The Cry of My People, Sun Ra's Space is the Place, Pharaoh Sanders again with Summon Bukmun Umyun, and Michael White's The Land of Spirit and Light. All are 180 gram. Each of them are $45. Pressed at RTI, mastered by Ryan K. Smith from the original master tapes. Gatefold tip-on foil stamped Obi strip. Or you can get them bundled for $160 and save a little bit of money if you want all 4. I personally am not, I'm a fan of each of these musicians, but I would say Sun Ra the least. Archie Shepp I'm very selectively a fan of. That Pharaoh Sanders title and that Michael White title are phenomenal, but I have both of them in their original form. Is it possible I'm going to pick up one of these just to hear how they sound? It is possible, but I haven't decided yet. In any event, those are available for pre-order. All right, and finally, and this one was just announced yesterday. No one knew anything about it until yesterday, so it's hot off the press. This is a 4 LP Charles Mingus box set. It is being put out by Newland Records, which is based out of the UK. This is the same label that put out the Dorothy Ashby box set that I reviewed probably a month or 2 ago. You can go find that video. And I really, really enjoyed that box set. I just thought it was excellent, and I still listen to it on a regular basis. So the material for this Charles Mingus 4 LP box set is from 1961 to 1962. It was originally recorded for radio play, and this is a reel-to-reel recording of that radio broadcast that has been put on vinyl for the first time. Now, this was previously available digitally as well as on CD, but they acknowledged that it was bootleg, probably shouldn't have been put out, and it wasn't necessarily the best quality. So the idea here is that Newland is remastering it and cleaning up the recordings. It is done in conjunction with the Mingus estate, so it is no longer bootleg. And personally, I think this is from a pretty exciting period in Mingus's history in terms of the performances being really just before the recording of the album Oh Yeah, as well as just after. So going on tour, essentially performing some of the tracks from that album. There's a variety of lineups here across, I think, like 4 or 5 different dates that make up this 4 LP set. But the lineup includes Roland Kirk, Yusef Lateef, Booker Ervin, Jimmy Knepper, Danny Richmond, Charles McPherson, Henry Grimes, Jackie Byard, and more. In the grand scheme of box sets, this isn't quite as expensive. It's $155. It's supposed to be released on October 27th. Believe me, I'm fully aware that there's been a slew of found music, lost music, etc., kinds of releases, and not all of them have been of high sound quality. And if I'm thinking back, I'm thinking of some of the Impulse John Coltrane stuff, the John Coltrane Eric Dolphy thing that just came out. There was the Thelonious Monk Janitor recorded thing. There was just a lot of different stuff, and not everything has been of high quality. And yet what is consistent is that people who like those individual musicians, and there's a lot of completists out there, and there's a lot of people who want to hear basically anything, right? John Coltrane fans wanted to hear that Eric Dolphy set, independent almost of the sound quality. Thelonious Monk fans wanted to hear that High School Auditorium one that a janitor recorded, regardless of the sound quality. And in some situations, the sound quality was surmountable by the excellence of the playing. So I don't want to fully put down some of these releases, and I will say I'm a massive Charles Mingus fan, and so that's what draws me to this one in particular, and so I'm particularly optimistic to see what Newland can do, both because they've had such amazing sonic improvements with some of their previous releases, including a Modern Jazz Symposium by Charles Mingus. That one was just phenomenal. Certainly the Dorothy Ashby set. So I'm optimistic for this, but I also acknowledge that it isn't necessarily for everyone. Okay, so that is where we stand on the new releases that are coming up in the future that I'm excited about. I mentioned the ones that I've pre-ordered and the ones that I haven't yet, but I'm considering. And if you looked at the Excel grid that I keep that lists those handful of titles that I have pre-ordered that are coming up, because I do keep that just to make sure I know what's coming up. That's basically the rundown. There's like nothing else that I have pre-ordered. So now you know where I stand. You know what I'm excited about. Now you can go out and determine if these are titles that you want to pick up in addition to whatever you're thinking about from the BN Classic series, the Tone Poet series, etc., etc. So I hope this was informative to someone. Maybe you learned about a title that you weren't aware of that's coming out soon. That's my only intent, is to give you the information and you can go figure it out for yourself and see what you're interested in. So if you stuck with me, I really appreciate it. Hit subscribe. Follow me on Instagram as usual. Check out some of the links in the description, and I'll see you next time.